Well, also while we wait, do you all have Adrian Cardle and Tim Taylor in the room?
We are in the room, Carl. Can you see me? I'm way in the back.
Okay.
Adrian's to the left.
All right. Okay, I finally get to actually see the folks I've been working with all along.
That's right. I think the last time we could see you, but you couldn't see us. I think that was the ordeal. So, one of the
Yeah, we did have problems with that, didn't
we had some technical problems that day.
It's a brave new world and it doesn't always work in the beginning, right?
Yeah, we've done quite well here lately. I think some of the folks are getting the hang of it, so we're doing a little bit better job getting it out there. We were challenged to begin with, there's no doubt about that.
Did I hear, I know is Richard back home tonight?
He is, he texted me and said he would not be able to participate tonight, but he is home.
I saw your son.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I told you, run,
And-
Marco won.
Hi, Jeff. Hey, everybody.
Hey, Ron.
Rick?
Yes, sir.
Hey, Doug, are you there? Yes. Is Rick here?
No, he's not here yet,
Okay. Is he coming, Doug?
as far as I know.
Okay.
We call him, make sure. Oh, Marianne,
How are you doing, Dad?
good.
Great. I see y'all are doing I think I'm like 2 minutes away.
We have a new neighbor Friday.
I'm so sad. Wilson's gonna be devastated.
I know, gosh.
First time he goes over there and Bobby not there and John and Maria, but at least I think they love animals too, but nobody's gonna love him more than Bobby.
He had to be in this while. He come right in.
She sent me, I sent her a message the other night about sorry if I'm leaving, and she sent me a picture while she said he came to the party. He was dressed like the car
Yeah, well, yeah,
inside.
yeah. Yeah, he came to my chair and sitting there with his buddies for dinner. Such a good dog.
He is, and, gosh, he's my family.
So he was.
When they come and visit at your house, just, then you let them know. And
Yeah.
they'll just like a little part of the travel.
Yeah. I'd say you'll smell them.
It probably will. Hard to believe, Rick, 3 or 4.
Three.
Keep it on.
We're waiting for Paul, right?
He's coming in the door.
Okay.
Hey, Rick, you on your way? Okay. What do you mean? He's on his way. All right.
Okay.
Yes.
Most people. A lot of old people.
That's how it was in Africa. Younger bird,
Yeah.
it never changed. He's a real
What's the cables, Mayor?
And
Sorry, everybody.
Need
to hold this map.
Or it was my granddaddy's birthday party.
I'm believe that option. I tell you, I wouldn't get that 300.
Yeah.
It's on its way.
Yeah.
You're gonna get him
I
in a
was
minute.
telling my coach.
I think she's close.
The brand
But, yeah,
guy.
what you
Well,
feel.
we'll go ahead and get started.
Okay.
Call the meeting to order. Everyone stand for the invocation of the pledge. Graham, would you care?
Our most gracious Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this evening. We thank you for blessing each and every one of us in this room and God by video conference with us. And we especially ask tonight that you give us wisdom and guidance and plans for the future. Thank you for Mr. Chitwood and his firm and all the time and expertise they put into these plans. We also ask that you continue to heal our land, all of those that are suffering with this virus. Please, we ask your healing touch, and especially that Richard will be able to rejoin us again in the near future. Protect all of our frontline workers, police, and EMS people as well. And again, thank you for the commitment that each person in this room has for our town. Lead and guide us. We ask all this in our Savior's name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. How you doing, Ray?
Doing good today.
You have the agenda. Any additions or deletions to the agenda? I would like to add one addition for council's consideration on a couple of projects that we have going in the town. I'll talk a little bit more about it when we get there to it. Okay? Any others? Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Have a motion, we have a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. Have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Curry,
Yes.
Mr. Hurst,
Yes.
Mr. Ratliff,
Yes.
Mrs. Strong.
Yes.
Motion carries. Carl Brown.
Yes.
Okay. Hey, Carl,
Yeah,
how are you today?
well, I'm really good today.
Well, I guess it's your turn to talk to us.
Okay, I will do it then. I'm gonna try to breeze through pretty quickly, but I want to at least hit high points. You all have the report, so you can read in lots and lots of detail, the analysis, recommendations, and things like that. But there are a few things which deserve to have a little more discussion. Before I even get into that, though, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping. One thing is, way back when I first scoped the project, I think it was Kevin Blankenship mentioned to me that there's maybe a salmon raising farm that would come into play. And at that time, it didn't sound like it was a done deal. So I didn't want to speculatively calculate rates for you all, assuming that would happen. And then if that were to fall through, then your rates would have to change immediately. So that was not a part of the project originally. But what I did do in my original proposal is I included my hourly rate. So if there was something that would pop up, and it could be like that too, the salmon farm, then you all, if you wanted to, you could just hire me at an hourly rate to do, there are various kinds of things that clients like to hire me to do like that. So this is one of those things. So it's not part of the original project, but I do have it scoped and I had it proposed. So if you did want me to calculate appropriate rates that you would charge the salmon farm, then I've just proposed to do that on an hourly basis. And as far as I know, it's either only water or mostly water, the service that you would sell to the salmon farm. So if that were the case, my best estimate right now is it would take about 10 hours to do the analysis and then the reporting on that. So 10 hours at the hourly rate. I think it was $114 or something like that net rate to you all. If you were going to sell them sewer service, then it would take about that much time to model those rates too. But if you're not going to sell them very much sewer service, if they're not going to run the pond water, the salmon raising water back through your treatment plant for treatment, if that is going to the river or otherwise not going back to your sewer system, but even if you hook them on for regular domestic wastewater in their shop and office and things like that, I really just recommend that you all charge them your regular out-of-town sewer rate to cover that kind of use. Only if they needed to run their raising water back through the treatment plant, do I think you would need to charge them a special rate. So in all likelihood, it's only a water rate analysis or a marginal cost calculation in the case of the salmon farm. So at the original proposal for the salmon farm, I also, in the original proposal, and then what I've already billed you for, was for one on-site meeting. It's basically this, except it would have been on-site. Costs more to travel there than it does to get on Zoom. So I included a way of your paying me for a Zoom meeting instead of an on-site meeting, but you've already paid for half. You pay for half at 90 days. So you've already paid for half of an on-site. So for the Zoom meeting, it'll end up being the hourly rate times an hour or two, have a little prep time. I might have a little follow-up time after the meeting, but an hour or two or whatever works out to at the hourly rate. So I'll end up charging you for that, a Zoom meeting, and then I'll refund that half payment that you've made for the on-site. So you'll end up netting a little bit of a savings that way. So that's my housekeeping. Any questions on housekeeping? Okay, I'll go ahead and get into the analysis.
We have one question.
One question.
Okay.
Could you speak to how, I mean, in the salmon farm, a sure thing, I mean.
Well, I'm probably not the one that can answer that, but from what I'm hearing, there's a lot of press releases out there, so it appears to be. And we're at liberty to talk about it more because it has been publicly announced. So, I mean, again, it's on the background and so forth, but there is a lot of public announcement on it. I can't assume anything different if I was y'all.
I think it's as sure as anything we.
Is the water going to go through our treatment?
Well, we had preliminary discussions on that, and obviously when we first started, the entire facility was supposed to be located in the corporate limits of the town. It's since then been moved to an alternate location, so technically they're not going to be our customer. They will be a customer of the Tazewell County Public Service Authority. The issues with that is the authority doesn't have enough capacity to meet what we think their needs are going to be. That's still debatable because of the problem of treating the sewer. The sewer is saline, it's salt water, and any plant that will really devastate a normal plant. like ours, obviously. So that's gonna have to be desalinated. And most of the technologies, I think, that we've heard about have to be reverse osmosis. And if they're gonna go to the trouble of doing that, more than likely, they will recycle that water. Now, they will have domestic type of needs, so I'm assuming that the Tazewell County Public Service Authority would take care of that at their Wardell plant. That's what I'm assuming. The capacity of water has been talked about, it started at 800,000 gallons per day. The last that we had discussion on was somewhere in the 400,000 gallons per day. So we will have to somehow come to an agreement to sell that capacity as a wholesale or as a member of the agreement for the facility up to that. And that hasn't been discussed yet in detail with council. So it won't be like a retail customer. It'll be a wholesale arrangement. And I would think the risk for the town would be to sell capacity in the county on a long-term basis, on a perpetual basis. And then we'd have to work that into delivery still involved. We can't deliver quite that much consistently across 609, which is Route 609 in Kitchener, without some improvements. It will affect, like you will say in a minute, it's going to affect, if we sell capacity, it'll affect the bonds on the debt payments. But that's still up in the air. We don't know exactly from them what they might need yet. So,
Okay, one other question. If you sell, are you going, I noticed you said wholesale, would not be out of town rates, and usually out of town rates is 25 to 50% more than someone in town?
if they were really if they were categorized to be an out-of-town rates, that's what you'll have to decide as a council. But to do that, that means delivery. And, we can't deliver that because we don't have pipes out there. So you're going to have to, it's not our customer. So it can't be an out-of-town customer, it's not our customer because we don't tie into them. But they have to have the water. They have to have the water from some source. And we're the only one that's been determined to do that, unless they find an alternate source like a well or something. I don't think that's been discussed. I think the town of Richlands is, from the day one, been the source for the additional capacity for water. But that could be discussed with the county, PSA, Mr. Allen, I think at that particular time. I think we need to figure out exactly what those requirements are, and then we can try to make some type of decisions based on what's good for our customers. There's risk involved with having a retail customer also. They can leave in 3 or 4 years, 5 years. We'd like to have some perpetual. We're going to be obligated to provide that. We'd like to make sure the rates reflect that till we get value back to the customer base.
Wouldn't you have a long-term contract with them? I mean, if you provide the water, of course you would have to have
Sure.
At least 20 years with the plant that you're putting.
That's what I would think.
Yeah.
That's why it makes sense to sell to them as a wholesale participant and reduce our costs in-house. I mean, Mr. Brown, you're shaking your head, so I assume that's what you're agreeing with. But that makes sense to me. And it kind of is in the flavor of what our existing agreements are on file today. But I don't think we'd arbitrarily want to treat them like a commercial customer and take all the risk and then maybe have some type of problem with the distribution divided out. It might be kind of messy to do it that way. But again, this is a unique situation. If they don't need them, if it turns out they're going to use 90% of recycled water, they may not need it because the county can deliver about 100,000 gallons a day to them. So I'm not quite sure until we hear from that. And I haven't heard unless one of y'all heard any different than that. That's all I know.
I mean, I've heard, okay, that they start out with 800, but I've heard a conservative amount they'll use is 400 gallons.
1,000.
Yeah, that's 400,000 gallons. And what I was wondering, what we're leading up to is, if we could engage Mr. Brown, since it's a short thing, to do his analysis. I think you said it would take 10 hours.
Yeah, it'd take about 10 hours based on the amount of data changes that I expect. And the way I would do that calculation is I would use the regular model that I created for you all, except I have a separate module that does a marginal cost calculation. So I would look at your adjusted operating costs and other kinds of costs. And then I would calculate the marginal rate at which the salmon farm would use your water and therefore cause your expenses. So that would result in a unit charge that is some marginal percentage, a lesser than 100% amount of your regular, think of it as a retail customer, your regular customer rate. And then I would also propose that you tack on to that unit charge a profit margin for the city. Usually I recommend, and I usually see these profit margins range between 25 and 50%. So you'd have a marginal cost rate. Basically, that's an unavoidable cost plus 25 or 50% or whatever percentage you all settle on. And then that would end up being their wholesale rate on a unit charge basis. And then on a minimum charge basis, they should at least pay, well, your out of town customers pay for whatever meter size they're gonna have. So if they've got a 4-inch meter, they pay the 4-inch meter minimum charge rate. That's at a minimum. And if they're going to use flow in a peaky sort of way, they're gonna run a whole lot of water at 10 o'clock at night and run it through midnight, and then they shut it off. If they're gonna do that sort of thing, then you have even more peak flow cost than what the average peak flow capacity cost of different meter sizes would be. So I need to know if they're gonna have a flow regime that is something very far away from a fairly even flow throughout the day. So anyway, there'd be some data for you all to gather, and I can tell that you're not to that level yet. But once you have a pretty good idea of, first of all, they probably are going to do it if a few things line up right for them. And then they need to know what kind of rate you're going to charge them to make sure that they did want to proceed. Once you had data that was pretty solid, I could run it into the model. I could calculate their marginal plus profit margin rate that you ought to charge, give you a recommendation on a minimum charge, and then you could talk with them. And you could tell them this is what our analyst came up with, so can we proceed? And if things are lining up good, that may be the end of it. They may want to come back to you and say, well, can you lower the minimum? Or they may want to do something about the rate, and then I'll advise you whether that is a good thing for you to pursue or not. That'll get you into the place to where you have a solid footing to negotiate with them on rates and terms and things like that.
Two reasons for that. That would give you some firm negotiations, as Mr. Brown says. And number two reason, since it's a pretty sure thing, when he did his analysis, we could include that in the rate and maybe not raise the rates as high as you're requiring now to include the fish farm. And if something happened that it didn't come in, we can always revisit it and take it out of the equation. So I think that would help all the citizens if I'm just, what council thinks, maybe let Mr. Brown do the analysis. That would give you negotiating power. And two, it would lower our rates for the 3 years that we have to raise. I think sewer is going to raise 23%, 24% is what you have in.
Sewer is going up the most, yeah.
So there's going to be rate increases. I think with the fish farm, this might help us a little bit in the rates. That's just a suggestion.
Yeah, and that, generally speaking, that is the case. When you hook on a new, really high volume customer, they're going to boost your flow by 25%. That is going to really reduce your unit cost, the cost to produce every 1,000 gallons. On the flip side, your water rates are actually a smidge higher than where they need to be just to fund the water system. The sewer rates are the ones that are really low. The sewer rates need to go up markedly more to be able to pay for the full sewer cost. I don't recommend having one utility subsidize another. You have a rate structure where you charge the same for water and sewer. I don't recommend that sort of a structure. Now, I understand that the funding agency, the SRF loan program agency, is comfortable lending where the water rates and the sewer rates are set to be the same, and therefore one would subsidize the other. There's no way around that because the costs are just not the same in water and sewer. So one would subsidize the other, but they seem to be comfortable with that. If you want to put together rates like that, you can do that, but I'm not recommending that sort of a structure. So if you do have the water utility pay its own way, the water rates may be able to go down a little bit more than what I've already calculated. At least initially they need to go down. It's like 3 or 4% altogether. But what I'd caution you on is unless the salmon farm is a done deal, you don't want to assume rates like that, set regular rates based upon the assumption that you have that other 25% of flow, and then maybe it doesn't happen. And then the other thing that it does is it gives the appearance to the grant and loan agency that you all are doing a lot better than what you really are right now. Until everything's signed and they start sending you money, it's not a done deal. So I don't want you to appear to the grant and loan agency like you're doing better rates-wise than what you really are to be able to take care of the customer base that you have right now. So I'd rather be more conservative, head down the road of raising the sewer rates as I calculated, slightly reduce the water rates for the first 3 years, but then they'll start to go up after that. And then the combined bill between water and sewer, when you add those up, the combined bill does need to go up fairly markedly. So it's going to look to the grant loan agency, yes, indeed, these folks do need our grants and subsidized loans, rather than start off assuming the salmon farm. If the salmon farm comes around in a year or two and you pick up enough revenue from it to make it so that you don't need to raise, for example, that third year's rate increase or some part of it, then in the third year you might be able to drop that extra incremental increase off. So at that point, folks would not have rates go up as much as what right now I'm projecting they need to do. So that's a long, long discussion to get all the way around to, I'd like for you to be more conservative rates-wise going in, and then if it turns out better in a year or two, you can slow down the increases. All right, any other questions or thoughts before I go over a few major points? Okay, you all actually hit on a couple of the issues that I wanted to talk about, so I'll breeze through those a bit. There is the salmon farm issue that may or may not happen. It may or may not make it so that you can adjust rates or raise rates less. If it does come about, then I'd like for you to aim at dealing with that when it does come about for your regular rates. Otherwise, I think that you should set rates under the assumption that it's not going to happen.
One question.
Yeah.
I understand about your, the conservative part of it, but what I'm wondering, if you did the analysis to give Mr. Taylor, when he negotiates, about the water flow and, you know, why we would have that. I mean, I think that would be valuable. You know, if you had all the data and said, okay, while he's negotiating with the fish farm, it would be nice to know the ramifications. I mean, to me, how many hours would you have to do that? I mean, I'm not talking affecting their rates. I'm only giving him some more information for negotiation for the fish farm, for the water.
If, for example, he's able to develop a starter set of new operating costs under an assumption, and let's just say it's 400,000 gallons per day extra flow. If he is able to tell me electric is going to go up this much, chemicals for treatment will go up that much, we're going to have to hire another operator. Now, I doubt if you would, but if you needed to do something to staffing, if it was going to change a cost, assuming 400,000 gallons, if he could give me that kind of information, then I can plug that data into the model and rerun the rates to do the marginal cost calculation. And I can give you all a real good idea of what the unit charge to the fish farm would need to be under that set of assumptions. And then he can go back to the fish farm and tell them, if you use 400,000 gallons a day, and if these other parameters come true, then this is the unit charge that we would need to have from you all. And then if they kind of waffle on the 400,000, well, it might only be 200, whatever happens, if they want to make a change, or if you all think, well, we're not really sure about this cost, so we need to assume high rather than assume low, but you might want to make a few adjustments to costs after we do that first run. That first run, I've basically invested most of my time. And then if Tim comes back and he says, hey, these 6 costs, we need to change those. It's not going to take me very much time to change 6 costs, rerun the rates, go back to the report that I gave you all, and do a little wordsmithing to change the unit charge that I proposed, to change a few odds and ends. So if it really did take 10 hours to do a once through marginal cost calculation and reporting, it might take 12 hours or 13 hours to do that revision. So it's not going to be a big deal to do a revision later on. And he probably will need some fairly solid information about rates to go to them with, to propose along with flows and things like that.
Would council consider that? I mean,
I think we've got to wait until we've got that money in the bank before we do much consideration on it.
well, the only thing is, if you go negotiate, you'll have nothing to negotiate with. They won't know the flow, how it's going to affect. I mean, when you go negotiate, you need,
But he's going to give us that.
no, you won't have it with, unless he does the analysis.
Well, yeah, I think we ought to have the analysis, so we can talk about it at 400,000 gallons.
But there's quite a few more details that has to be fleshed out too. If they need 400,000, and I didn't know if you want to get too detailed, but I know for a fact we can deliver 1 MGD across the, like I said, 609, but that's not reliable enough. So there's some costs that are going to be incurred there, so some additional debt. But from the capacity issue, that's 400,000 to the meter. We lose in that area about 15 to 16% water loss. PSA, my best guess, knowing what I hear in conversations, about 30% loss. So if you add 30% loss from the time it gets to our borders on, and 15% loss, then we're talking about another, 100-some-thousand gallons a day. So there's a lot more here going on than just 400,000. So I need those details. I mean, and I don't know if the county's hired an engineer to do PR yet or not. Can you Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think I can. I don't, Thompson and Litton has a retainer agreement with the Public Service Authority, and we have a proposal in our hands. I don't think they would mind at all sharing this because they have a good relationship with the town of Richland. They have sent that proposal to Cumberland Plateau to see if they would fund the study. There's two components. One is to look at the water component. That's 400,000 gallons per day, possibly all of it coming from Richlands across Kent's Ridge to the county's meter. And then the county would pick it up there and run it through their lines to the customer, to the fish farm. There's not a direct line from Richlands to the fish farm, so you'd have to use the county's distribution system. But there's also discussion, maybe Richlands sells 300,000 gallons, and the county pick up 100,000 there at the Wardell plant. We've got to evaluate that plant, your distribution system, the pump stations across 609 to make sure that's about 278 gallons per minute that you have to deliver above and beyond what you're doing now. That's 400,000 gallons in one day. That's the size of a small tank sometimes. So we got to evaluate all of that. And we still have not, the Public Service Authority has not authorized to proceed. They're waiting on funding. Once that's done, now as far as the sewer, they're looking at taking the sewer's 350,000 gallons. They're looking at taking it all to the Wardell plant, not coming across Kent's Ridge. At one time, Mr. Rapp was exactly right. They're looking at things at all back across Kent's Ridge, but the cost of it was so exorbitant, they decided to try to cut it back and use a Wardell plant. Now, we got to look at that. That plant's new. It's only 700,000 gallons, but we're going to be adding 350,000 to it one day, so we may have to look at some type of expansion there. So that's part of this study, and but we're not even started yet to be able to give the information, but the Public Service Authority has agreed right up front when it started, they'll have to sit down with Kim and Pam and make sure we all know we're going down the right road and working together on what's the best interest. So I think what Mr. Taylor's saying is a lot of those questions of what Mr. Brown said will be answered during the preliminary engineering report stage.
On some of the,
Yeah, they will.
to get some information that you'll need, no one knows as much as you do about the system. To get you some information to negotiate, like the flows and all, if we had that analysis, then I think it would help you a great deal, don't you agree?
I think the cost, once you get the cost established to what upgrade you got to make, then you can kind of back into the cost per thousand, what it's going to cost to what Mr. Brown's talking about. But there's one aspect of this thing that Mr. Taylor mentioned, and we don't want to lose sight. The town of Richlands customers and citizens have paid for that water plant down there for years, and they own 64% of that plant. And they paid for that. Your other partners, town of Cedar Bluff and Tazewell County PSA owns proportional shares, 6% Cedar Bluff and 20% for PSA. But now, where this water is going to be leaving your system, it'll go into the PSA system. So you'll be selling the water to the PSA, not the fish farm, unless you work out some special language with your agreement with the PSA. But the important thing is, if they come back and want 400,000 gallons of water, there's capacity that you've been paying for on that plant for years that you need to be reimbursed on that allotment that you're going to sell to the PSA. They understand that. They know that. So it'll be identified in the study. So, and I think we're a team and they've worked together to just get everybody, like you said, show them the numbers, here they are. And it's not a sin to make a dollar. It really ain't. But then sometimes, people look at jobs and creations and decide, well, it's worth salvaging that dollar for those jobs. But that's above my pay grade. I have to give that up to y'all folks. So.
If it goes into Tazewell County PSA, can we still charge a marginal cost? Like, I think the average is like 35%, something like that, Mr. Brown.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm
marginal
sorry.
plus profit.
I don't know how your contracts are now. I know they're 20+ years old. And you might want to go back and revisit. I don't know if you could say we're going to live with our contract based off of what the cost is for this much. However,
I just mentioned part of those, last bullets we got from the funding agency, we will have to negotiate new contracts.
Yeah.
With PSA and CBA.
Okay.
That's part of
Now, I didn't know if you could have a 2-tiered type rate. Again, here's how much 400,000 gallons gonna cost you for fish farm, and here's how much this is gonna cost you for your customer. I don't know that, but that's not unheard of. I know Carl's probably seen those before. You know, because that 400,000 gallons a day, that's a big demand. Like I said, that's the size of a small tank.
It's half of this one.
Yeah.
What it's gonna do is, it's gonna put wear and tear on that plant.
Exactly. We're gonna look at the plant, we're gonna look at your distribution, your storage, your pumping, everything across that. And not only yours, but look at the PSAs also, because they gotta, once they pick it up there on Kent's Ridge, they gotta take it.
I mean, it looks like to me we're on 64%. I mean, wear and tear, it's gonna make the lifespan of that, water plant less, so the citizens should get a
But
little
what I
higher
would
water.
look at is, just round numbers, say they come back and they wanna buy this amount and it's 5%. So, okay, we're gonna work out the price, what 5% of our capacity's been since we started. We want that price, and then here's how much we want per 1,000. And it's derived based off these numbers here, here, and here.
Right. If you take a marginal price, then you take the risk with it too. That's the other part about them leaving. So, but we already have that paid for. And you're right. If we sell that capacity, Tony, there's merits to that too. They're gonna pay us that money. We'll have to reduce our debt.
Exactly.
Reduce what's in the coffers. That could even be in the form of a long-term monthly or annual.
And if you remember, they're doing it
We're doing that now.
right now, and we'll have it paid off in about 2 years, where they were about 8 years behind getting on board for the Richlands. So they're paying it now, so they're used to that and understand, and it's not an uncommon thing. You know, if I paid for my car all these years and you want to start riding it too, I expect you to back up and help me pay for something. But,
Mayor, I have a question.
okay.
Or two things. One is, I just got some good news, and I'll share this with you. You know, before I started the quarantine, I was negative, and I got my lab test back, and I'm negative.
Well, good.
That means I can go back to work at school on Friday and this celebrate. Thank you. And the next thing I want to ask, I'm listening intently and I'm very interested. I was sitting here listening to the conversation and also just browsing through the packet that we have, Mr. Brown, and it's 111 long. So I'll ask you, where were you when we started? And what page are we on?
We haven't even made it into the report yet.
Okay. How did we do that?
How do we get going on the report?
Well, I'm just asking, I don't know, and I appreciate the questions. I was reading ahead just a little bit and trying to follow up what we were doing, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, no, we're just kind of free form talking about the fish farm situation.
Okay. And I'm hopeful for it. We've all been hoping for this for years, and if we do hope that we get, that we get the money, as you say, and I'm with Doug, we want to make the best out of this for everyone. But we all know, sometimes nothing is good till you got the money in the palm of your hand, which is basically what you're saying, I think. So, anyway, where do we start on this report?
Why don't we go ahead and get started into this report? We're going to be here in a minute.
Could I ask one more question?
I think we should.
It's about rates.
I will tell you all, I can tell by the conversation that you're pretty savvy about how to go about dealing with this fish farm project. So you have really good instincts, follow those instincts. Somebody, an engineer, is going to do some engineering to figure out what it's going to take to get water to the fish farm. So that is going to be a piece of the pie that I need to look at. And then I suspect Tim and Adrian are gonna be able to do a good job of coming up with cost adjustments, operating cost adjustments. So we'll be able to figure out how you can get started on the rate with the fish farm. The way I approach situations like a wholesale customer or something like that, coming along to a utility, is I want both parties to come out with a good deal. If they get marginal cost plus a reasonable profit margin, it's good for the fish farm. It's also good for the town because you sell a heck of a lot more water. Your economy of scale improves a lot, meaning your unit cost goes down. And you also make a profit on a marginal cost basis off of that extraordinary customer. And then also, by the way, you're gonna get the benefit of some more jobs and things like that too. So you have lots and lots of pluses that will happen if you do it right. I can tell that your instincts are to do it right. So I'm not concerned about you that way. I just want to get the correct numbers to you so that you can take them to them. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the report. Let me see if I can get that back up. If you'll go ahead and open the report, there's a cover letter on the front that I just kind of give you a little basic info about it. And then a table of contents. And are you seeing a table of contents on the screen for me?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so table of contents, there is lots of material that I covered in the report. A lot of it up front is some of the basics about rate setting, process, thinking, things like that. So it's kind of a little primer for you, but everybody who does rate setting, they need to get some good footing about how to go about rate setting. I have some assumptions and important things. So important assumption details, caveats, things like that. COVID-19 is the first one. Can you all tell if COVID-19 has harmed your revenues in water and sewer much? Do you have very many folks not paying?
Yes, we have, delinquency with all of our utilities approaching probably $70,000, which is fairly major for us.
Okay. And of course, that's gonna go on for a while, and hopefully we'll get some vaccines out there before too long, and we'll get to turn that around. But COVID-19 and bill assistance is just something you need to be aware of. I tell folks if you can avoid having a formalized bill assistance program, that's much better. They're real messy, they're just kind of a real problem to try to administer, but you might end up needing to think about that. And then I've got some other assumptions and things that I talk about. So I'll let you read those for that kind of information. I'm going to skip over all of those basic sorts of things and get into the water model first, and then I'll cover most of the information that I need to for it, which also is the same in sewer, except it's just different data, different rates that come out. So I really won't talk about sewer very much once I've done water, because I will have already covered most of the important things. In the water model.
One question, Mr. Brown.
So her question.
Maybe I missed it. Do you have a graduated cost built in? I noticed, I like what you did with the lower rates, but do you have a graduated usage price built in?
I'm not really sure what you mean by graduated.
Okay, like a
rate.
business, okay, at a certain point, if you have at a certain point when a business uses so much, the cost goes down. Like it reaches a certain amount. Most towns have that. I know you got the cost per
Okay,
gallon. You understand that?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about now. So I jumped over to table A. So table A is on page 25. So go ahead and flip into the report to that. Table A is the in-town rates. Table B right after that is out-of-town rates, which are higher than in-town rates, or that I recommend. I graduate the minimum charge based on meter size. So the minimum goes up as meter size goes up. As I recall, you did not have the graduated rates you're saying, those are usually called inclining or conservation rates. So as a customer uses over, for example, 5,000 gallons, they pay 25% more or something like that.
No, I mean, what I'm looking at is the opposite. When you use, like a large customer that uses a lot of water, usually when they go over a large amount of water, over the scale, then it's, they get a break in the cost of it, the more they use it.
Okay, that's called declining rates. Declining rates anecdotally take into account the notion of economy of scale. As the number of thousands of gallons you produce goes up, generally your unit cost goes down. Now it doesn't actually go down linear, in a linear way. It goes down for a while, and then when you have to do something like build a new water treatment plant or a new sewer treatment plant, suddenly the cost jumps up big time. And then over time, as you use more of that capacity, it will go down gradually again. I did not calculate a unit charge that varies. I set a level unit charge based on your average cost to produce. So basically what you're talking about is if somebody uses only a little bit of water, it costs more per 1,000 gallons to serve them than somebody who uses a whole lot of water. But I calculated your average cost to produce, and for most of your customers, or I'll back up a little bit, most of your customers use pretty close to the average. You don't have a whole lot of variation. And I'm gonna go find a table where I can show you that. I'll have to do a little scrolling, but I'll get there.
I guess my concern, if you have a business that moves into town and they use a lot of water, most towns give them a lower cost when they reach a certain pyramid in the water. Yes.
That is, I'll call it fairly common. I won't say it's real common. Now, it's the further east you go, the more common that sort of a rate structure is. Get out on the East Coast with you guys, and declining rates are still fairly common. Declining rates are kind of truthfully, they're kind of an old rate structure. We're moving away from declining rates. We're going more toward level unit charges. And then you get out in the arid west where water is kind of tough to come by. They have inclining rates or conservation rates. They want to encourage people to use less. So as volume use goes up, the unit charge goes up. So depending on where you are and what you're trying to do and the nature of your customer base, you might choose any one of those three structures. Level unit charges are the most common around the country. Level unit charges are pretty easy to defend because it's pretty easy to calculate the average cost to produce. It's really difficult, and truthfully, you can't even calculate a declining rate on a cost to serve basis because you have to make lots of assumptions about what happens to your cost when you use lots and lots of water versus only a little. All right, your average residential customer only uses 3,211 gallons per month. That is in the vicinity of the average in rural towns. Somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 gallons is what I usually see. Somewhere in the 4,000 gallon numbers, I see that real commonly. You're on the low side of average use. Now that's residential customers. That's also a small meter customer. If you happen to have a few that have big meters and maybe an in-ground lawn irrigation system, those folks are going to use a lot more than 3,200 gallons. But I would guess that half or more of your residential customers use within 1,000 gallons of 3,200 per month. When that's the case, you can't really pick up a whole lot of extra money by charging conservation rates. And truthfully, you don't lose a whole lot of money by charging declining rates unless you've got a fish farm or something like that. Some customer that uses hundreds of thousands of gallons. So in your case, I really chose to stick with the current structure, a level unit charge. That is pretty much where we've been heading to in this country for a pretty long time. So probably wasn't a satisfying answer for you, but that's where we're headed to in this country, and then that's also why I calculated the rates that I did for you.
Oh, that's fine. Good answer.
Now, to get back to that table A, page 25, a 5/8, that's a 0.625 inch meter, a 5/8 or a 3/4 inch meter. Most of the time, those meters are used interchangeably for residential metering. I almost always make the assumption that the capacity costs are the same for that size of a meter. The flow is not very different between those two meters, and it's real low for both of them. So I calculated your minimum charges for those two meter sizes, and you may only have one of those meter sizes on your system. I calculated both those to be the same. So that was $10.02 per month. And then at 1 inch meters, it goes up to $12.75, and you can see that it graduates. If you get all the way up to a 6 inch meter, it's about $100 per month. A meter that size, a 6 inch meter, has about 40 or 45 times more flow capacity than a 3/4. So that's why the minimum charge is higher for that size of a meter. Earlier, you all had a discussion about the fish farm. If it uses 400,000 gallons a day, it is absorbing a lot of your capacity to produce and supply water. Existing customers or previous customers paid a lot of money to build that capacity. You're going to be doing that sort of thing again. So you have a lot of money sunk in capacity costs. You really should recover that money, hopefully as fairly as you can. A meter size basis for recovery of capacity costs is, I think, about as fair a way as you can do it, because peak flow capacity tracks well with meter size, because big meters have the ability to pass a lot of flow. So you can see the minimums graduate. I calculated a no usage allowance. You don't give away any flow. I think you had 1,000 right now, if I remember right. And then a unit charge that works out to $3.29 per 1,000 gallons for every 1,000 gallons that a customer uses. That makes it real easy for you all to describe to somebody what the rates are. If it's residential and it's 5/8 3/4, your clerk tells them it's gonna be 10.02 a month, plus 329 for every 1,000 gallons you use. They don't have to say if you used 5,000 or less, it's 329, and if you use 5 to 10,000, is 429 or whatever other number it might be, and they don't have to say this, that, and the other, and then do that separate calculation and sum it all up. It's real easy to describe. It's easy for somebody to verify what their bill was and what it should have been. On average, a customer that uses 3, 4, 5,000 gallons, their bill at this sort of a rate is going to be just about the same as if it started at 250 and then went to 3 and then went to 350, or the other way around. The average customer's bill is not going to be different because they're average. So those customers, they're not affected by the rate structure. It's the ones that are real far one way or the other that are affected by the unit charge structure. Okay, so that's table 8. That's the rates that I recommend for in-town water. Out-of-town water, charge them a premium. For the minimum charge, it's not a big deal. For the unit charge, it works out to, I believe it's $1.20, no, $1.10 per 1,000 gallons more. So that's recognition, essentially, that it costs more money to get water out of town than to get it somewhere in town. Now that's anecdotal. You might have some out of town customers, they're just right on the outskirts of town and they're downhill. Doesn't take any more electric to get to them or anything else. But on average, it costs more money to serve customers out of town. Plus, when they're out of town, they're not in-town property taxpayers and everything else that you need to make the town work. So you charge folks out of town a premium. That's the rate for water. For sewer, and I'm getting the rates first so that you'll be able to see what I'm recommending, and then I'll give you a little idea about how I got to that. For sewer, you need to go to table C, which is on page 30. Sewer, minimum charge for small meters, $14.66 a month for in-town, no usage allowance. Unit charge of $4.05. Sewer is going to cost more than water. Again, graduating minimum charges based on water meter size that serves the property, but the unit charge would stay the same. That's in town, and then out of town again, a premium, 2023 for the minimum and 540 for the unit charge. Now I'm going to skip to a table that tells you about the effects of this kind of a rate. And this is the thing that the grant loan agencies look at a lot. It's table 17. Table 17, a calculation of the bill for, and I did it for 5,000 gallons per month for a small meter, residential. It's $29.50 right now. Half of that is actually half water, half sewer. But the bill for that is $29.50. It would actually go down for the first adjustment and the second and the third. And then after that, it will begin to graduate up very slightly, just 1% per year. Your water rates are actually a little bit higher right now than what they need to be to only fund the water system. So the affordability index, this is an indicator of how affordable it is for a residential customer to use 5,000 gallons. They will, right now they're spending, or in 2018, the year of our data, they spent 1.17% of their household income to pay the water bill. At the new rate, adjusted the first time, it would go down to 1.05. It'll eventually get down to right at 1%. Around 1% is the national average, as far as I can tell. I've never found the actual statistic. Maybe the Census Bureau or somebody has it, but I haven't found an average affordability index in the United States. And of course, it's going to change as we go through time. But best I can tell, it's about 1%. The grant loan agencies generally want an affordability index of 2% or higher before they give you any grants. Now, you always later get some grants. So they have some other reasons why they want to give you those grants, but they generally don't like to give grants unless your affordability index is in the vicinity of 2%. And then there's another way they calculate that, and that is when you add the water and sewer bill together, if the affordability index of the two are greater than 2%, then again, they start looking at giving you grants. Now, your affordability index on water is not high, and it's not going to go high at the calculated rates. About 1% is where they're going to end up once you're done doing all these adjustments. Now, I'm going to skip up to the sewer capacity indicators and show you the affordability index for the sewer rate for that same volume. Again, it's 1.17 in 2018. After you're done doing the third adjustment, so that'll happen in the second year, or excuse me, that'll happen in the third year, your affordability index for sewer will be 2.2%. You add 1% to that from water, and you have a total of about 3.2%. So the average residential customer spends will spend 3.2% of their income to pay the water and sewer bill. That is a really important indicator for the grant loan agencies. And I suspect they've already done some calculations and figured out, based on what it's going to cost to do your project, you all are going to have rates where the affordability index goes up quite a bit. When it comes to getting cheap loans and grants, a high affordability index is a good thing. When it comes to people actually paying their bills, it's not a good thing. You want cheap rates. I made the assumption that it's better to try to please the grant loan agency on the front end and show them rates that are going to be relatively high. And then in future years, your rates will not need to graduate up as quickly as inflation will happen. You'll be able to lag behind inflation a bit. And if the salmon farm comes along, instead of having your overall affordability be 3.2 in that third year, it might be that it'll only need to be about 2 or so if you're able to forego an extra rate adjustment. Now, that's not a great picture, having a combined water and sewer affordability of over 3 when it comes to folks paying their water and sewer bills. But if you have to have new water and sewer plants, it just is what it is. You just have to pay whatever the freight is. That's affordability. I'm going to give you one little primer about how I arrived at this cost structure or the rate structure at all. And I do that by classifying costs. I'm going to do it in the water model. It's table 8. So if you're able to find table 8 before I get there and tell you the page, All right, table 8 is on 50, page 52. In this table, I took not 2018, not the test year's cost data, but I took that data increased over time to the year 2023 at an inflationary factor is basically 3% for almost all the expenses. So I inflated your costs over time to 2023. I did that because since you're setting rates for the future, it's good to look at costs in the future. And I come up with the rate structure, the fixed cost versus variable cost, minimum charge versus unit charges, by classifying each cost by its nature. What is it related to? So auditing and legal, that is what we almost always call a fixed cost, because you do auditing, you have legal issues for the most part just because you have customers. So that's 100% fixed. I'm going to skip down to one, chemicals and treatment, about in the middle of my screen, $80,443. I called that one 0% fixed and all variable. You have chemicals for treatment because you treat water. If you don't have to treat any water, you don't have to have any chemicals. So therefore, it's a variable cost. It goes up in direct relation to the gallons that you treat. So that and electricity are the two major cost items that I basically always classify as all variable. Once you go through this process of classifying costs by their nature, you end up with an average for the entirety of the costs, and it worked out to just shy of 33% fixed and 67% variable. That proportion of the costs is the proportion that I use to calculate the minimum charge versus the variable or the unit charge. So I ended up calculating minimum charges, so they would raise approximately $500,000 per year, and the unit charges, so they would raise about $1 million per year. About a 1-to-2 ratio is what that worked out to. And then depending on what's going to happen in the future with general costs, the minimum charge and the unit charge will need to go up, but they go up in lockstep with each other based on the nature of those costs. So I ended up with an average fixed cost of $16.78. Now, if I remember right, the actual starting minimum charge I recommend is $12 and something, but the $16.78 is 2018 costs inflated all the way up to 2023. So I discounted that $16.78 back to the present, and that's where you start. Same thing on the unit charge or the average variable cost. So that's cost classification. That sets the cost to serve, basic minimum charge, and level unit charge rates. Those starting rates only go up or down based on what's going to happen with costs in the future. And also, like in your case, since you wanted to spread the initial increases out over 3 years, that means those unit and minimum charges are going to start out low, they'll graduate up by a third each year for 3 years. That's classification. So that's that, and basically that is the basis for cost to serve or cost of service rates. You may have heard that sort of a term before. That kind of a rate structure Basically, it's accepted by everybody that grant loan agencies like that kind of a structure. I'm pretty sure your grant loan agency will like this kind of structure better than adding water and sewer together and coming up with something that really isn't cost to serve for each utility. It is for the two combined, but not for each utility. The minimum charges are a little different. The minimum charge is the basic fixed cost, that 1678 or whatever it worked out to really. And then I added surcharges on to recover costs of capacity. And I'm not going to show you all of the tables that I have to use for calculating that. But the minimum charge based on meter size, which really is based on the flow capacity right in the middle of that table, the flow capacity of different meter sizes. Now I mentioned the 6-inch meter. A 6-inch meter, singlet meter has a flow capacity of 1,000 gallons per minute. The 5/8-inch meter only 20 gallons per minute. So the 6-inch singlet meter has, if I'm doing the math right in my head, 50 times more capacity to pass flow than a 5/8-inch meter. That is the basis for the surcharges for capacity cost. So the tables 12 through 16 do those calculations. I spread them out over several tables because there's just a lot of material to try to show you all. When you add that surcharge based on meter size to the basic minimum charge, you end up with the minimum charges that I showed in those tables, A and B for water and C and D for sewer. Now I'm going to jump back again to the sewer rates. Sewer is your high cost utility. And that's actually normal. It's normal for sewer to cost more than water. So sewer, minimum unit charges need to be higher, and they need to be higher than what they are right now, markedly. Water, because you're averaging water and sewer rates together, water is subsidizing sewer. So water doesn't actually need to be as high as what it is right now. So water can go down a little bit, sewer needs to go up a pretty good amount. When you add the two together to figure out affordability, bill affordability for a customer, or if you want to put together combined rates, then you can essentially take table A and table C and add those numbers together. Take table B and table D and add those together, and those would be the combined bills for a water and sewer customer. Water can go down, sewer needs to go up pretty markedly. Add the two together, the effect of the two together, and overall your rates need to go up. Not actually more than what I usually see. Your rates need to go up in total of about 12% or so. I usually see rate increases in the vicinity of 20% on the low side to about 45% on the high side. So yours don't need to go up just a whole lot. And I also need to tell you, even though I'm looking at your in-town sewer rate at $14.66 minimum charge, I'll tell you that's pretty cheap. And $4.05 for a unit charge, that's pretty cheap too. I see $6, $7, $8 per thousand for sewer, and $20 or so for a minimum charge, just all day long for residential customers. So your actual rates are pretty cheap. Your income level is really where the bite is. Your average income level is lower than what I typically see. So even though the bills are not going to be all that high, the ability of your customers to pay is not as great as many other clients that I have. So tables A, B, C, and D, those are the recommended rates. If you were to basically accept the whole notion of cost to serve rates and the methodology and all those sorts of things, and if you accepted my assumptions about future costs are going to be about right, and if your engineer did a great job of calculating and assuring the cost is for these improvements are going to be about what they came up with, if all of those assumptions came true, then you're going to need rates in this vicinity. You all get to decide though, where you're going to set rates and how you want to set the rates. I think I probably hit the first piece that you wanted to do. You wanted to spread the adjustments out over a little time. So I spread those out over 3 years. Normally with adjustments of this size, I don't even end up spreading them out. We just do them in the first year, and it's a 35% increase or whatever it works out to. But it's X percent. They kind of bite the bullet one time, and then they just go inflationary increases after that. But I understand trying to blunt the surprise of folks when they get their water and sewer bills that first time, because they're going to see their bill go up, unless they're a low volume customer, they're going to see their bill go up. And it's always a surprise to everybody, even though you gave them lots of notice that it's going to happen. But you need to make sure, and I'm pretty sure you're a savvy bunch, that when you talk to folks about what needs to happen to the rates, a big driver is the need to do system improvements. You got some really big system improvements coming along. So that's really going to drive rates pretty heavily. So assuming that you do those improvements, the overall bill is just going to have to go up. It's just what it is. All right, do you all have any questions, comments, or thoughts?
Anyone? Sounds like we're pretty good.
All right. What you need to do is you're going to have your own discussions amongst yourselves. Okay, does it sound like folks in town can do this? Are we going to have a certain segment of our customer base paying whatever works out to $15 a month or something more? Are we going to have a segment that's going to be slow to pay then? Are we going to have to do something to deal with that? Is it a big enough deal that we don't proceed? You'll need to think about those sorts of things. But if you're going to do the improvements, you're going to need to satisfy the grant loan agency that you're jumping in aggressively to set rates where they need to be able to pay their debt service. They want to make sure that the parts that they only lend to you, it doesn't become a de facto grant. They want it to stay alone. They want to get that money back with a little bit of interest.
Okay, the number you just threw out there of $15 increase, is that water and sewer together you're talking about?
Oh, I was just throwing a number out. I'm not remembering right now what the increase would be, but it works out to 23% on average for sewer, and then it was about a 5 or 6% overall decrease on water. So let's call it 20%. If somebody's bill was $30 a month and their overall bill is going to go up 20%, that's $6 a month.
Don't you have that illustration on 103 that you could go over page 103?
Yeah, it's in a table. It's table 6.
18B,
Table 18.
Page 103. That gives you a 3-year look at for each one of those customers that use certain amount, all the way up to 75,000.
All right, is that table 18B?
That's what I'm looking at.
Okay.
Carl,
That's-
I'm looking at.
I'm making sure I'm on the right table. Thank you.
And there are two tables 18. Those just show the bill adjustment for each one of the utilities. And then table 18B, which I put in the sewer model, that one shows the combined water and sewer bill. So I need to open up the sewer model for that. Oops, that's water. Huh. Okay,
I have it as page one.
so this is what table 18B looks like. This is when you combine the water and sewer bill for the first year adjustment, second and third year. So that last gray highlighted block, that's the third year. So once you've done all of the adjustments, those three years worth of adjustments, and then if you look at the very last column in that block, that's the bill increase or decrease over the 3 years. For example, 3,000 gallon customer, that's real close to what your average customer is. The total of the increases over 3 years would be just right at $14. And for 3,500, and 3,528 gallons, that's what I'm told the grant loan agency is assuming your average use is. It'd be $13.75 over that period of time. And actually I might be looking at the, not certain on that. So it's going to go up in the vicinity of $12 to $14 or so for customers in the vicinity of your average. And then as use goes up, the increase, the dollar increase is less. And when you get to really high volumes of use, which you have almost no customers up there, their bills would actually go down. So you have a rate structure thing going on when you get to high volumes of use. Almost all your customers though are between 2 and 10,000 gallons. So they're seeing those teens kind of dollar bill increases. This is what customers, residential customers, would actually experience for bills because it's a combined water and sewer bill right now. And almost all your customers get water and sewer service. For sewer alone, just plain old table 18 in that same model, go back a page. I have that comparison for your different kinds of customers. So it's a little more extensive table. All right, so I think that was a question on what's going to happen to the bills overall. Any other questions?
Yeah, what was the yearly income that you used? Based on.
That shows up in table 17. It's in another table too, but you can go to 17. So go back a page or two. And there's if you're in color, then it's a light green highlighted block. That's the normal affordability index. And the annual median household income, AMHI, within service area, that line that's in the middle of that green block, the 2018 income was $30,149. I think Tim or Adrian, one of your staff, gave me that number and they were passing along from the Grand Loan Agency. I had a different, I went to the Census Bureau and I had a little different number. This one, if I remember right, is a little bit lower than the Census Bureau data. But since you're going to the Grant Loan Agency to get grants and loans, and they're the ones who are concerned about affordability index, it's a good idea to use their number for AMHI. So I plugged in their number. I also made the assumption, and this hopefully really wouldn't happen, but I made the assumption that incomes would not rise over the next 11 years. Now they really will, so that means your affordability index will get better than what it's showing in the model. But I believe most grant loan agencies use the 2020 or thereabouts. We'll do another census. They're trying to do it right now. And in a year or two, that data will be out, and they'll use that data for 10 years until a new census comes out. So they will make the assumption that your income level is $30,149 until we get to 2022 or 3 when the new data comes out, and then they'll adjust that, and it may go up to 38,000 or some higher number, but then they'll hold it at that for a long time again. So they want to have basically a certain number. So right after the census data comes in, that's about as certain as you can get. And then the adjustments that are done in the in-between years, those are based on lesser confidence surveys. So those are much more estimated numbers.
The funding agency directs us to a website and confirmed that number to us. That's how we got that. So it's a website.
Okay.
I don't remember the link, but it's a website and a conference call they direct us to.
Yeah, okay. But anyway, that came because that's where they get their number. All right. If you all have no other questions, do your regular due diligence and discussion amongst yourselves. If there is more to learn from the engineering firm about the project or from the grant loan agency about funding and timing and various things like that, if there's more to learn and it ends up being what I'll call a big deal, if the project's going to be postponed for a year and a half or 2 years, or if they're going to give you a whole lot better interest rate on the money you borrow, or they're going to give you another $500,000 in grants. Now, on the grant side, it does need to be a pretty big number. I modeled what would happen with an extra $400,000 grant, and it only has a single digit, real small, it's like 2 or 3% effect on rates. So you got to get a honking big grant, to use technical terms, to make it so that your rates could go down by very much. But if something big happens, then have Tim, have Adrian, have somebody pass that information back to me, and I'll run it into the model. And then I'll tell them this is going to be the effect of that sort of a change. It's probably going to have to be a pretty big change to affect your rates by very much. But if it is, then I'll redo the models. I'll revise the report, send that out to you, and then you can base your rate decisions on the latest available data. want you to get started off as accurately as you can. Otherwise, it's just up to your deciding and proceeding with all the stuff that you gotta do. But my work was extensive for a while, but yours never stopped.
All right, Mr. Brown, we appreciate your time
Thank you.
and energy.
You are welcome.
Thank you so much, and I'm sure you'll be hearing from us some more.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised. You all take care.
You too.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna sign out.
You're up, Mr. Rick.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In your handout, I prepared for you. I don't want to take a whole lot of your time tonight to go down memory lane. I know Mr. Hurst is new to council, but most of you folks have been here for a while. I know we've been working on these projects for water plant upgrade and distribution system and the wastewater treatment plant for about the last couple of years. The first thing we do is a preliminary engineering report. We bring the regulatory agency representatives down to visit the facilities, to look at and have them concur that improvements need to be made. They in turn go back to their funding agency representatives and say, yes, I agree, they need to do these improvements. And then we put funding applications together. Now, what I want to do is, as you can see, Mr. Brown done a very, very thorough study. He is very highly recommended across the nation. He does a lot of studies for several states. He works with the Virginia Rural Water Association in Virginia. Mr. Brown hit on some of the things that funding agencies look at. One that they look at specifically is median household income. He's exactly right, the $30,149. I don't know if you remember when I came here about a year ago, it was $28,000. It's gone up to $30,149 in that time frame. Now that's the number that the health department wants we have to use to look at what your rates are. It determines whether you're disadvantaged and whether you can get grant dollars, what they call principal forgiveness, or low interest loan money. As it sits right now with your current rates, you're not eligible to get disadvantaged or low interest loan money because your rates are too low, just simply put. Everybody around you is paying higher rates than what you are, and they've said several times, we're not going to give the community grant dollars to keep the rates low when the neighbors are paying higher. And I understand. Now, they also, when they look at it, and one of the things Virginia has done has been a tremendous help. Mr. Brown mentioned 2%. Virginia only wants to look at what your utility bill will be 1% of your median household income. It's $30,149. They only expect you to pay or your citizens to pay 1% of that each year, which is about $302. Now, I'm talking about just water, okay? I'm not doing sewer, just water. So if you take that $302 and divide it by 12 months, that's about $25.17 a month for 3,528 gallons of water that Mr. Brown mentioned. So if your customers, right now, I run some scenarios with Mr. Brown's proposed rate increase, it would be $21.63. You still don't get to that level with that grant money. Now, not only are they offering a $400,000 grant, which is the maximum amount they can offer this year because of COVID and other things, but they also might be able to cut 1 full percentage point off of the interest rate with this advantage. But they won't even look at it without it being that $25.17. So, and that's based off of a family using 3,528 gallons per month. Now, Mr. Brown made a very good comment. Is it worth getting $400,000 grant and a lower interest rate. In my opinion, it is. Anytime I can get a 1% lower rate and $400,000 grant, I want to look at every angle we can to get principal forgiveness money, because you got to keep that cost down. Now, he's looking at the sewer, and if I run my numbers correctly, and y'all may correct me if I'm wrong, I'm looking at 3,528 gallons a month. Your water under this rate would be 2163, and your sewer would be 2895. That's a total of $50.58 a month for water and sewer for a customer using 3,528 gallons. If you divide that by two, that's $25.29. Guess what? You're disadvantaged. Your 2517 is what you need. If you divide it by two, it's 2529. You're over that amount. Now, it flies in the face of what Mr. Brown said, because the cost of sewer is the cost of sewer, and it's 3 times higher than water. Everything you deal with is sewer higher. But most municipalities, and I don't know if y'all do this now, if your water's $10, your sewer's $10. But if you keep that philosophy under this scenario, and you combine them with the rates he's talking about, and just divide it by 2, you're there at the medium household income that would qualify you. It's the same amount of money. You're gonna pay that money whether at his rate or whatever. You just divide it and make it proportional. And then what you do is you show the health department, we're meeting the median household income level where we are for 1%. So we'd like to get that $400,000 grant and 1% loan decrease if we could. That's no promise, but again, you have to ask them. Now, we've had some discussions with Ms. Ward with the health department. When I say we, Mr. David, Ms. Ford, and myself, she seemed very positive. That's the reason she gave us a time extension. If we could look at this, she seemed very positive that she would take a good look and see if she could get $400,000 grant for you. The only thing, the council has to adopt the rates. And well, a 3-year period, wouldn't ask you to do all that at one time. It'd probably break people. I know it'd break people's backs trying to pay all that at one time, but do it over a 3-year period. And their position is, and I think what you're gonna find out, the Virginia Resources Authority, who is the bond counsel for the sewer plant, DEQ, and the bond counsel for the health department on the water, they're not gonna let any municipality do anything that jeopardizes AA bond rating in Virginia. So what they're gonna do is not only look at your sewer and water rates, they're gonna look at your general obligation, they're gonna look at a whole lot of things. And in that packet I give you, there's an email where they spell out those things they want to look at. So they're looking at debt reserve and different things like that, because I think what you're gonna see is the town of Richlands for this water and sewer, they're gonna want a dual obligation, general obligation, and a revenue bond. That's how they're gonna want it. Now, these terms, in the last page of the handout I give you, the very last page kind of sums up. You got a sewer plant, we estimate right now total project cost of $10.9 million. DEQ has offered to you $8.1 million at 0.5% for 25 years, and a $2,734,864 grant. That's a great offer in Southwest Virginia. But that's still $8.1 million you gotta pay back over 25 years. At that 0.5%, that's about a $349,000 a year debt payment, just on the debt. Your water, we're hoping if we adjust the rates and we can get that rate like we talked about, we can get that 400,000, get a full percentage point knocked off there. That would bring your annual debt payment to around $203,000. But with all the work you got looking at right now, it's right at $15 million, $14.8 million. A little over $3 million of that's grant, and the rest of it's very low interest. That's about $552,000 annual debt payment you're gonna be hit with in about 3 years. But you're gonna have to have revenue in place to pay. I think the fact it's gotta be done, it's gotta be done. The work, it's necessary. The only thing we could do and see, and when I work with Mr. Payne and Ms. Coyle, is try to reach out and try to get the best financing out there. Because if you guys will remember, I was here about a year ago and I told you, I thought ballpark figure, you was looking at $13, $15 a month rate. And I had looked nothing other than simple math. But I think Mr. Brown kind of backed into it. So, there's a lot of things, and it's not easy talking about rate. I don't like rate increase. But I sure don't like to turn the faucet on, not having the water either. So, but, I think in your packet, there are schedules for the wastewater plant, and there are schedules in there for the water treatment, for the system upgrade. And I've highlighted in your packet action that needs to be taken by the council. Now, Ms. Ward with the health department wants an answer back by the end of this month, if it was told, is that when she wants it? On whether you want to pursue it. And what I think what she was going to want to see is the council willing to adopt a water rate increase and give me a schedule when they will do it. In that schedule, I just put a date in there. I didn't have any idea of knowing the time frames. I showed the December 8th council meeting. I don't know if that's possible and stuff, but that would be, and you don't have to incorporate the rates in. All you got to do is say, yes, we agree, and next July 1st, 2021, we're going to do our first rate increase. July 1st, 2022, we're going to do another rate increase. And then 23, July, we'll do the last rate increase. Now, that's about the only thing I could see that would be, the town has any other choice. I just would never recommend you turn this type of financing and offer down. I know y'all business people, y'all been around banks and understand that's a very, very attractive financing offer.
I understand you're saying that we don't have to do the increase until July.
Yes, sir. You have to adopt them and have something on file that you're going to adopt them and put them in place. Now, they don't have to be in place actually until after completion of construction. And that's the reason I put it out 3 years, because if we start right now and go through, it's a 3-year process if everything works.
Well, we are renowned for taking on a debt that we owe for and then not passing the revenue increasing.
Yeah, I think what they're gonna want to see is action from the council. I don't know if it's a resolution or if it's whatever minutes taken, but they're gonna see a vote from council that agrees, here's what we're gonna raise your rates, here's how much it's gonna be, and when you do it.
That email that Mr. Pearson got from Virginia Resources Point addresses pretty much, we've accepted the terms of that already. Council's done accepted the terms of what's been offered. Now, what happens now is the actual getting the rate covenants and the bond documents in place. The financing agreements that we signed. So, but she did go back. If you ever had, we had conversation, they gave us some things that the finance committee with VRA had wanted us to do. And I gave that to council. What they were trying to do was obviously do what's called double barrel bond obligation, like you said, with revenues from water, sewer, and the geo taxing, and also have that security. But they also wanted the electrical part. If you remember that.
Yeah, and I think they backed off on that.
They did.
That's good.
But they did only through the provisions that they might, the rate covenants have changed just a little bit instead of 100% for those type of rate covenants for debt reserve and so forth. They want up to 115%. But that got rid of the lien requirement for the electrical revenues, which makes us worry a lot better.
If I'm not mistaken, I don't mean to interrupt you, Tim, but we looked at that about a year ago. Those fees are tied up with another contract you have on the electrical.
Yeah, it'll affect our ability to buy power through rain. If you may not keep us from buying, but we'll have to pay more for it.
Okay, I didn't fully understand. I just knew, I just said that committee, you know.
But those are on page 6 of that handout you gave. It's on that, some of that. But those are the things that we're gonna get, in the coming weeks, we're gonna get these rate covenants in place.
Right.
But the big one for the whole thing is going to be the actual rate analysis to be adopted and implemented. But they will go on a resolution of intent, I think. So that's why I wanted to clarify that by the 8th of December. I think if council adopts these rates by resolution on the 10th or the 8th of December, that lets it move forward. And we can, but you will have to have the first set of rates, because it says in
First 2 years.
within that first year. So you'll have to include this part of the budget cycle
Right.
and have them in place July 1.
Yes.
And with the other subsequent ones in place the next 2 years.
I
It goes one ordinance. That's what I'm-
I was thinking what Mr. Rabbit started off, if you adopt these rates and you put them in place, and then you're fortunate to get a big customer and come back and look at your revenue.
Oh, yeah, you adjust.
I think you come back and adjust it.
Yes.
And I think that's what Mr. Brown was saying. Let's go down the road as if that's not gonna happen, and then if it does, it's great, because we got a year before you really have to do it. I mean, got the next July.
Well, what happens too, if you go into the building cycle and the cost comes in $500,000 less, you don't have to borrow as much money.
Exactly.
Then you'll go back and they're only gonna give you the money that, so your rate's gonna go down because of the fact you have to pay another $500,000 back over 25 years.
Exactly.
Okay, somebody said that someone's expecting this, agreement by the 20th.
Miss Ward with the health department, wanted an answer on her offer of the 3.8 million at 2.5% for 20 years. She wanted an answer by October 30th. Well, we wanted to talk to council, wanted to have this meeting. So Mr. Taylor Portal asked her if she would give us a time extension. And she's agreed, and she said, I'll give you a time extension until November 20th, okay, November 20th. What she wants by that is come back with a counter proposal and say, Ms. Ward, what we'd like to do, we're looking at our rates, we're looking on December the 8th, probably adopting the following rates, which would put us over put us in a disadvantaged class that we'd like to have you refigure the proposal.
To get a cheaper rate.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, we've accepted the offer contingent upon negotiating that point.
Oh, yeah, you didn't want to lose what you had, but.
And they've already voted on that, Rick. I don't know if you knew that.
No, I
They've already voted on that.
Okay, well, this may give you a better rate, better.
Contingent upon the fact that they know we're trying to see if we can be available for that $400,000.
So are we gonna come in here on December 8th, and on December 8th, we have to take council action that says we're gonna increase those rates in July?
Yes. July 1, 21, 22, and 23.
So the council, if y'all are not ready to stomach that, say it now, don't wait until the 8th, and then say we're not gonna do it.
I have a question. You said something about not until the project is completed.
What they want, in other words, and I timed it, that third one being about the third year, it's gonna take about 3 years to get the project completed. And your first payment in that schedule, I estimate to be somewhere around September of 2023. So your rates have to be in place and adopted before September 2023. That's the reason I figured July 1, 21, 22, and 23. And I think that's what Mr. Brown looked at this study.
And over the period, the way they're staggered, over the period of the 3 years, you accumulate that money that goes into the fund to be able to pay that when it's due.
Right.
And still have your debt reserves.
Right.
What bearing, if we go back to the health department, she gives us 1.5% because we're disadvantaged. What bearing will that have on the rates?
We need to look at it, but that'd be a full percentage point she knocked off. So that's 2.5% for 20 years, so.
And if you act quickly, you get that extra.
If you can close it in 12 months, 0.2%.
And to get to 400, so there's a lot of reasons why this might go down, but you can't wait to see because then they won't.
No, they want these, because they got all sorts of municipalities knocking on the door, want this. And I know there's a $400,000 grand levy. With the health department. You know, locality time on the time of thing.
And you might even have time to adjust them before they're actually adopted, that they'll agree to before July 1, if we get started on looking at it.
I think the biggest thing right now council needs to have to do is just agree, we're gonna have to have a rate increase. Here's how much we're looking at based off of our studies. Here's how much we can do it to get this advantage with the health department. And we want to do it over a 3-year period. And we want to adopt that and put that in amendments with an understanding in year 2. If you have a big, nice customer, you might want to revisit and look at it. But they're going to want, when I say they, Virginia Resource Authority is going to want to see this on behalf of the EQ and the health department.
Do we have any obligation, since laws part of it, do we have any obligation to make it to know what we're doing?
You know, they've been along the discussions,
We've been working with it.
and they realize they have to pay their percentage. Yeah, but they have to trust it, and the town's gonna do the best deal.
Yeah.
Mr. Absher and Mr. Ball have both attended,
Yeah.
Rod here. So tonight, do you need council action tonight?
No, sir. No, sir. I just wanted to come tonight. I wanted to listen to Mr. Brown. I wanted to explain to you, and it's in this packet. It's right out of the health department procedural guidelines about 1%, a median household income target user rate. So it's all there. And I just run the quick numbers. If you do his rates for water, you're still $3 and something below. But if you do his rates for water and rates for sewer and combine them and then divide it by 2, you're there. You're over. And you do. So the customer's gonna be paying it one way or the other. Either pay it on sewer and water for the same amount, or add them together and divide it by 2. And then you get the advantage of having to work customers for that. And most municipalities do that.
I think it'd be very difficult not to do it that way.
Yeah.
Because customers already gonna be upset. Then if we don't split it equally, they'll have it more difficult. Well, what is it we have to decide on the 20th, which is Friday?
You've already voted we got that done, we got an extension, and we were able to get that at the last meeting, to authorize us to adopt that letter, accept that letter of offer. And I've already sent that in, correct, or where
That was accepting the funding.
Yeah, just the funding offer.
That's all.
Okay, so that has been done.
That's been done.
Okay, I misunderstood.
But we also told
Okay,
them,
I'm sorry, I was trying to remember, I remember what we need to do, if I understand correctly, is on our next council meeting in December, we need to have a vote to pledge to do this. Is that correct in general?
yeah, don't get, it's confusing because we've got 2 projects going on simultaneously.
I got
And
it.
you've got one organization we're close to getting actually a financing agreement, which is with the wastewater plant. That's the best deal. The stuff with the water is, we're just trying to get the best deal we can for them now, but we haven't finalized that. We haven't really we've got an offer, but we think we can do better. And it's a good offer.
Yeah, it's a good.
But it's indexed too, because you don't really know what it is until the date.
Right.
So if you put it off 2 years, you're gonna lose that for 2% and so forth and so on. But you've already agreed at the base level to do that. But when we're getting the in the weeds type of discussion with the Virginia Resource Authority, which is gonna be the same group that handles the other one, is these grant covenants and bond covenants. The health department knows we're gonna have to do it anyway because it's the same rules. So we're just kind of watching.
And
It's the same group.
I'd say VRA knows it's coming, and they're looking at it. One of the things I want to mention on the wastewater plant, we submitted that funding application about a couple of years ago when the median household income in Richlands was like 28,000. And we got a wonderful loan grant ratio with them, but theirs is not based as much on median household income as it is health concerns. So we got that money locked in. Now the water, don't mean know how to say something. Water people don't care what sewer bill is. They don't know what water bill is. That's what they judge us by.
But the Virginia Resource Authority, since they're tying both of them in liens, they want an ordinance for water and sewer rates, not just water.
Exactly. Now, I'll say this in hush, I know the evening's late. Nobody, and I mentioned, nobody likes rate increases, especially what we're talking about. But if it's any comfort, if you have these rate increases, and you're apparently gonna have to get these, you're still gonna be right at or lower than what your neighbors are paying right now. So you're not gonna be any higher than what your neighbors are. And they're having to have rate increases on top of that. So the town, I applaud the towns for going years without a rate increase. But you're so low, the funding grant agency won't even talk to you unless you get it up to what you're able to do.
One question, if we vote on this motion December 8th, could we make part of the motion that if the, gentleman comes, as we think it will, the rates will be adjusted comparable to what we get from the gentleman?
I think what you may want to have Wayne check this with bond counsel, and that's one of the things y'all need to get procuring on.
Yeah.
But maybe you can put in that language with the bond counsel that you would reserve the right, along with bond counsel and the borrowers, folks, to adjust your rates based off if you have a large user come on board. But I think you can do that just about any time and anywhere.
I think if we put it in the motion, it would obligate council to do it.
Okay.
I think what Ron was asking is basically on the 8th, you're voting to accept the cost of service study as presented, right? And agreeing that rates will be adopted by proper procedure in July based on that study. And if there are any revisions, then
And that the
That's-
water and the rates, once the revenue based on that would be, what do you call it, then combined, and but you can, if you got a $50 a month bill for water and sewer, it's going to affect you.
Effectively, I think would be.
Do we have to wait
for that?
Well, I'd like to have it in a resolution, we don't have to prepare, I think it'd give more validity to it than just a single vote. I think it would be better to wait. You can vote tonight, if you intend to pass a resolution, if you like.
But with that motion, we could still put what Mr. Richlands said, that we have the right to revisit.
I would recommend you get your bond counsel to word that, because that's legal stuff, I'm not really good.
Yeah, and it's gonna be whatever the bond council feels comfortable with, but at the bottom line, what they're gonna do, they'll finalize their final bond distributions, and they'll assess, they're just not gonna give us this, it comes in less, they're not gonna give us all this money.
No.
And that way it'll be adjusted anyway.
Yeah.
I think you're perfectly fine with doing that. I mean, that's just me personally, but I think you're gonna have to convince somebody that what you're doing is not trying to be subversive.
Sure, and that's something to be aware of on that, council has the ability and the right to adjust these rates whenever. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that there won't be ramifications of that you have to look into with these other issues. However, I don't know that exactly what you're trying to do is accomplishable, because this council can't bond future council into an action. Like, we can't vote now to say if X happens, then that council has to do something
We
in the
can't,
future.
we can't put it into revisit.
The council always has the right to revisit it. What I'm saying is, this council can't vote to bond a future council 3 years from now from doing something.
But we can't put in there to adjust the rates.
You can, but it would just be within the discretion of council a year from now, 3 years.
I mean, if we put in there to adjust the rates comparable to what we save from, the reason I want that in there, and I'll vote for it, is I've seen very few governments that once they get their hands on money that want to give it back. And if we obligate, that we will adjust comparable to this gentleman coming on board, I think I'd feel a lot safer.
I'm just, yeah, that's what I completely understand what you're saying, though. It's just, council can't bind future council into an action or into an omission. We just can't do
Well,
that.
I think it's different when you say, this council, we will adjust rates. If we're raising them, we can put the caveat in there that the council will readjust rates. I mean, if we explicitly spell it out.
You can put whatever caveat you want to, it's just not going to be all that effective, 10 years from now,
But
5
if
years
we
from now, 3
say-
years from now.
Could you, research that?
Sure, I can.
I think
I'm
if
pretty
you
confident.
put exactly what's gonna happen, because we're voting for these increases, and you put, hey, comparable to what we saved with, I think that would be.
And there might be some sort of limited exception that we can carve out because this is a novel situation with this, but I've got some just knee-jerk concerns with council doing something that's going to bind the council either into doing something or not doing something in the future.
Well, we're gonna bind them to increase the rates in July next year.
Sure, but the council thereafter could change those, and you can't diminish the ability of council to
Put it-
change it in the future or not to change it.
Put it on.
We can say that for 3 years, but then they can come back next year and say, well, no, we don't want to do it.
Okay,
There you go.
but at least put it on them, Wayne.
And then have the bond council copy.
And then.
Yeah,
and-
you lose your money with it.
And that's all irrespective of any issue, the
I
ramifications.
don't think it counts as one.
I guess.
Question, Paul.
Yeah.
Ma'am, I'm understanding what you're saying. I just wanted to ask Rick again. Rick, were you suggesting that the bond council, people who advise on legalities of how to write this, are you suggesting that we get their input on how to word this? I'm asking.
Yes, sir, I think that with Wayne's oversight, him working with the bond council to get that proper language. Because
Okay.
I agree with what Wayne said, you can't obligate future councils because you could put it in there and they come back very easy and say, man.
Well, but,
I'm going,
but what would that do? That would put it on them, let them pay for these.
I'm going, you're probably overthinking it. I'll tell you why.
No, we've already got it.
No, we
don't.
gotta get you right.
3 years.
We have to get the rights where they need to be.
I can tell you from experience with bond councils, and we've worked with them on a lot of projects, there's lots of rules about going indebted with bond that you have to, there's no way Wayne has that expertise. We've got to do an RFP and get a bond council on board, because there's lots of other things that y'all probably thought about. There might even be, the last time this happened, DRA actually gave us a resolution to pass. To be quite frank with you. With the right
Bond
verbiage.
council will work hand in hand with one.
Okay.
But in essence, no action is required tonight. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, correct, Doc.
Okay, thank you.
But just hump up and be ready for it, because on the 8th, something.
I follow. I just want to make sure I'm on the right track.
All right. Okay, let's get on with it. Rick, appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir. If I don't see y'all have a nice Thanksgiving.
You too. Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank
Thank you, Ron.
And bring it back.
I'll go home. Thank y'all again.
Okay, update on the grant writer. Dan?
Yes, we advertised for the position of grant writer. It'll be a position that will be under Connie's department, and that's where it probably should lay. That particular position, we're on council's direction to try to advertise it. We had limited type of participation. We had one applicant that was, but before we move on, before we do anything else to get the next step to go about interviewing and providing any type of offer, council has to appropriate money for that, because we don't have that in the budget. It's more than the 1% in Hines budget that you inherit. So we worked out a 20 hour per annual type of fee. An hourly rate of $15, what I heard last time we used that with the FIC benefit totals. And A few miscellaneous things we'll have to buy, like a computer and provide a telephone and so on. We expect, at least we would think it would need to be $18,000 appropriated for that particular use. So before we proceed on, council has to approve that money to be, basically put into Connie's budget for the grant writing position. So we'll need an action from council.
Okay, let's get a motion and a second one, and then we'll discuss it. Discuss. We have a motion? What's the matter, guys? This is something we've been saying we wanted for 6 months. This is exactly what I'm afraid is gonna happen on December 8th.
We had a different route. We could have got a grant writer on contingent and not paid unless we had, a real grant. That's my only,
Okay, so you guys don't wanna do it, you don't want to grant writer.
I think that we need one.
Yes, my biggest concern, I don't have one happening, I guess.
But that's what I wanted to ask, so we advertised it and
2
we
weeks.
had one.
Yes, that's my biggest
It's
concern.
certified grant writer. Several people, even with that last agencies that write grants, you don't have that certification.
who was that?
I don't know if it's proper to say, really. Probably not. Is that probably?
We can go in closed session, set the personnel motion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go in closed session and see what.
I can't make motions, guys, I can't second them.
I'll make a motion that we go into executive session pursuant to,
2.2, 3711 A1.
and I'm gonna learn that eventually, you know.
I'll say,
Have a second,
I'll say.
okay? We're going into closed session, don't y'all go for it.
Who seconded it?
Okay, roll call vote.
Mr. Curry,
Yes.
Mr. Hurst,
Yes.
Mr. Ratliff,
Yes.
Mrs. Strong,
Yes.
Mr. Wood.
Yes.
Okay. We're in executive session. Frank, you can let us know when we're good to go. Anybody need to take a back? Application or review it all?
Make a motion to come back from executive session and, or, certification that subject talked about in the short session.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to come back into regular session and to certify that nothing other than personnel was discussed during that executive session. I have a motion.
Motion.
I'll say.
I have a motion and a second to certify the content of the meeting and return to regular session. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Curry,
Yes.
Mr. Hurst,
Yes.
Mr. Ratliff,
Yes.
Mrs. Strong,
Yes.
Mr. Wood.
Yes.
Motion carries. We're back in regular session. The other thing I had, and hopefully it won't take more than 2 or 3 hours, is, we've got 2 grants. We've got a grant for the Greenway that we've had for over a year. And we've got a new grant, actually 2, with a grant from Thompson Foundation and money from our board of supervisors member, $30,000 toward working on the library. What I would like council to consider is to allow me to go to the IDA meeting, which is on the 8th of December, and ask the IDA to take these 2 projects and move forward with it.
Do you need a motion for that?
I don't know whether to do or not.
What do you do?
What role do you play this year?
I want to do it. I want to get it done.
The Greenway, just discussed it, because we got the Greenway, we got the final document. So we can go ahead and start getting quotes tomorrow.
Why not let them do it?
But you can.
I mean, and I think you're covered up.
Well, sure, I have no problem, just want to.
I'd like to give this over to somebody, and the IDA right now is anxious. They're chomping at the bits to go get something done. And
I'll make you a motion, Paul, that you take it to the IDA and let them get started.
I'll second that motion.
motion.
Is this the Richlands IDA?
Yes.
No, it's
Okay.
Pulaski. No, I've been a smart guy. Sorry,
No, I mean, is it Richlands IDA or the
Yes.
Tazewell County IDA?
Richland. Richland.
Okay, it needs to be in the motion.
I'll make the motion that you take that to the Richlands IDA and let them get started.
Okay.
And I will second that motion.
Okay, for discussion, go over what each one is, the Greenway and
The Greenway spot, we got the grant from, Connie, you may have to help me here a little bit, but the Greenway, we got a grant over a year ago to, put like a pavilion in there, a building, a stage, permanent stage and all that, along with,
Master
Hmm?
we passed over the.
yeah, a play area for children, an educational area.
Yeah, we already have the train. It's kind of like a little play area for the
Yeah.
kids. It's down at the PD. We have
Okay.
that, and then Tim does have the final drawing. He sent that to me, I think, was it last week?
That's good.
Yeah, we had the final drawing for that. We just need, I guess, I assume to get quotes to get that built.
Right.
And then,
Same thing with, if I may, same thing with the library, only these are recent. Connie got the grant, 25,000.
yeah, and then we got the 5,000.
from Travis, and,
Adrian, we got the 5,000. Travis said they had mailed the check.
I have to say,
And also sent, Thompson Foundation was supposed to send us the 25,000 plus, and I guess the wording with that and see what the,
There's probably good reason to doubt there's not enough money in the budget with 30,000 to do the library. So there's gonna be a
No.
reason to go to get more money. That's good.
Yeah.
well, what I would like to charge the IDA with is getting a scope of work. Somebody come and do a scope of work, okay, we need to do the windows, we need to do the siding, we need to do the, whatever, fill in the blank. And this one's gonna cost this much, this one's gonna cost this much. Then we take the money we got and we get started doing something.
how far along are you guys on?
We've got the scope of work, we've already got the quotes based on the
For the
estimates
windows.
for all that. The problem is, the quotes, just the materials alone, are $36,000. So there's no money for labor. Now, if you want us to do it, then that's a whole different issue.
No, we don't.
So you're gonna have to chase some grants, is what I mean.
Well, does that material do everything, siding, windows?
That's windows. Do you have the exact, I got my desk.
I think the $30,000 would cover the materials that we had quoted, is the windings, the sidings, and get those finales, like, I think across the front of,
Spindles and
the
all that.
library. The other 30,000 would have been for labor.
So we're about half there.
And
Yeah, we
what
have
I'm
half.
saying the IDA may do is say, okay, we can do the windows for 15,000. Let's get them done. You know, or we can do this part of it. To start making some kind of show.
Or couldn't council do that? We can instruct Tim to, do certain things, with what money we had. And I think since they're far along on the Greenway, I mean, IDA's gonna have to catch up. I'm thinking you guys could probably react quicker, couldn't you?
We can do all of it. We have the skill sets to do all of it. The trouble with that is you're taking the street department to do those works, and then I get criticized because we're not doing street work. So,
Yeah, we just.
That's the problem.
Just go on.
I'm like the mayor, I know the IDA is very eager for projects.
But is that for the, I thought they went out and got forms.
Well, they can take the 30,000, and they may even know how to get a matching grant, and we'll have 60,000 to do the whole project.
And with.
I think that, Rick, I think that's right. I think
That's
that's
the way to do
what Paul's headed for, is to try to, enlist the IDA to help with the remainder of the money it's gonna take to fix up the library, bank, et cetera. Is that right, Paul?
No, I'm asking for them, not only to try to get the rest of the money, but to go ahead and start looking at contractors and taking the scope of work we've already got.
Okay.
Contractors.
The whole,
Well, we can start making a show. If you go look at the Greenway right now, which I've been talking about for a year and a half, and I can't see anything that's been done over there other than a Christmas tree and a sled.
We got a love sign.
I love that.
How far,
That's
how
different
far around you guys on the Greenway?
we got the design on the stage. The concrete work is already designed. I mean, we already have all the designs, just a matter of bid.
Okay, okay, could we split that off, give the IDA the, well, and you guys keep the Greenway?
I think the Greenway is fine, but to take charge, it gives a little bit of relief for staff, you know, so if they want to do that, I think it's great. I like the idea of trying to get funds from the library. The trouble is, we just can't use our staff to do it, because we do, it's gonna take away from street work. That's not good.
Okay, let's vote.
Okay, what are we doing? I'll go to IDA.
You're going to the IDA. We've got a,
But we gotta pass it.
yeah, I put the motion, Jeff seconded it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call vote.
Mr. Curry,
yes.
Mr. Hurst,
Yes.
Mr. Ratliff,
Yes.
Mrs. Strong,
Yes.
Mr. Wood.
Yes.
I'll do that at the meeting on the 8th, and I'll keep you guys posted on the television. Your time to shine, remember to recess.
I'll make the motion to recess the meeting until Monday. What's the date?
So,
Whatever Monday's date.
23rd.
And 22nd,
23rd.
27th.
23rd.
The 23rd at 6 o'clock.
I mean, 23rd, I'm sorry. Out of my glasses, I'm bad at it.
Okay, Thursday.
Just leave it on top.
I'm good. Did we get everybody?
I
We got a motion and a second.
I don't have a
Recess
second.
till Monday.
I'll second the motion.
Roll call vote, please.
While we vote, no, I'm sorry.
Recess. Recess.
We'll recess the meeting Monday at 6 o'clock.
Mr. Curry,
Yes.
Mr. Hurst,
Yes.
Mr. Ratliff,
Yes.
Mrs. Strong,
Yes.
Mr. Wood.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, guys.
See you, Rod.
Okay.
Okay, good
Yeah, I
night.
think it would be good for you though.